Right now, in April 2026, American warships have sealed off every major port in Iran. More than 10,000 troops enforce a blockade that could become the opening act of war. But this confrontation did not begin last month, or last year, or even this century. It began 73 years ago with a CIA operation so successful it accidentally created its own worst enemy. This is how a forgotten coup in Tehran produced the Islamic Republic and the war Washington is fighting today. In 1908, British prospectors struck oil at Masjid Soliman, the first commercial gusher in the Middle East. The find birthed the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which rapidly became the single largest industrial enterprise in Iran. For 4 decades, British engineers pumped Iranian crude, while Iranian workers lived in mud brick shanty towns beside company swimming pools. Iranian oil workers earned roughly 1/5 the wages of their British counterparts for identical labor. After renaming itself the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the firm sent most profits and almost all taxes back to London. By 1950, a new generation of Iranians saw their country as a petroleum colony with a throne on top. Their champion emerged from the Qajar aristocracy itself, a frail 68-year-old lawyer named Mohammad Mosaddegh. He was theatrical and famously conducted parliamentary debates from a cot. Dressed in pajamas, Mosaddegh held a doctorate in law from Neuchâtel and had spent decades fighting foreign concessions in parliament. On 28 April 1951, the Majlis elected him prime minister, and within days he signed the nationalization decree. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company lost its crown jewel overnight, and Britain lost its most profitable foreign holding. Time magazine named him Man of the Year for 1951, calling him the strangest statesman alive. London refused to surrender the oil and moved to strangle Iran instead. The Royal Navy patrolled the Persian Gulf, while British diplomats pressured every refinery in Europe to refuse Iranian crude. Iranian production collapsed from 242 million barrels in 1950 to just 10.6 million by 1952. The Abadan refinery shut down, and the Iranian economy began to strangle under the blockade. Britain wanted its oil back by force, but it lacked the strength to invade alone. So London turned to Washington with a new argument, one built for the Cold War. Mosaddegh, they said, was not a nationalist, but a communist risk who would soon hand Iran to Moscow. President Harry Truman listened politely, then refused to overthrow an elected government. But in January 1953, Dwight Eisenhower entered the White House with 2 hawks at his side. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles and CIA Director Allen Dulles accepted the British pitch as gospel. In March 1953, Eisenhower authorized a joint operation with British intelligence to remove Mosaddegh from power. The Americans called it Operation Ajax, the British called it Operation Boot, and the target called it nothing. To run the plot on the ground, the CIA chose a 37-year-old blue-blooded operative named Kermit Roosevelt Jr. He was the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt and a veteran of wartime intelligence in Cairo. Roosevelt crossed into Iran on 19th July 1953 under the cover name James Lockridge. He carried suitcases of unmarked American dollars intended for Iranian officers, newspaper editors, and street operatives. His Iranian partners were the Rashidian brothers, a wealthy network of bazaar merchants on the British payroll. Their task was to persuade the young Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, to sign 2 royal decrees. The first decree would dismiss Mosaddegh as prime minister. The second would appoint General Fazlollah Zahedi. The Shah was only 33, nervous and terrified of losing the peacock throne his father had built. For days, Roosevelt met the monarch in secret, coaxing the hesitant king toward a signature. On the 3rd August, the Shah finally agreed, and the decrees were drafted in total secrecy. On the night of 15th August, Colonel Nematollah Nasiri drove to the residence of Mosaddegh to deliver the firman. But Tudeh Party informants inside the army had already warned Mosaddegh that the decree was coming. Mosaddegh was waiting, and Nasiri was arrested the moment he knocked. The first wave of the coup had collapsed before dawn. Tehran radio announced the attempted coup, blaming the Shah, and the monarchy appeared finished. On 16th August, the Shah and Queen Soraya fled to Baghdad on a small twin-engine plane. They flew onward to Rome and checked into the Excelsior Hotel, waiting to hear if they had a country left. In Washington, the State Department drafted cables to abandon the operation and pull Roosevelt out immediately. He refused. From his Tehran safe house, Roosevelt improvised a second plan in 72 hours. He still had the signed firmans, the Rashidian brothers, and a briefcase full of untraceable American cash. For 3 days, his agents funded marches to flood Tehran, chanting for and against the Shah. The goal was to create visible chaos that would justify a military rescue of the country. On 19th of August, crowds organized in part by CIA assets surged through the bazaar toward the capital center. Some were genuine royalists, some were paid agitators, and many were weightlifters from the Zurkhaneh gymnasiums. Royalist tank units under General Zahedi rolled out of their barracks and joined the mobs. By afternoon, the crowd reached the residence of Mosaddegh on Kirk Street, where loyal guards opened fire. A Sherman tank fired a single shell into the building, collapsing part of the upper floor. Fighting raged for 9 hours in the streets around the prime ministerial compound. Between 200 and 300 Iranians died in the crossfire that afternoon, most of them civilians. By nightfall, Tehran belonged to the Shah, and a democracy 3 years old lay buried in the rubble. Mosaddegh escaped over a back wall, then surrendered himself to the new authorities the next morning. General Zahedi was installed as prime minister within hours, and the Shah flew home from Rome. The CIA wired Zahedi $5 million in emergency funds, plus $1 million personally for his loyalty. In his televised trial, Mosaddegh declared that his sole crime was nationalizing the oil industry of Iran. He delivered defiant speeches for 8 straight days, and the front pages of Europe printed every word. Prosecutors demanded the death penalty, but military judges sentenced him to 3 years of solitary confinement. After his prison term, he was removed to the village of Ahmadabad, 120 kilometers from Tehran. He died there under house arrest on 5th of March 1967, never free again. The CIA celebrated Operation Ajax as its first clean regime change, a template for the next 2 decades. A new oil consortium divided Iranian production between British and American firms, with the United States taking 40%. The Shah returned from exile with a new self-confidence and a new patron in Washington. In 1957, he founded a secret police force with help from CIA and Mossad trainers called SAVAK. For the next 22 years, SAVAK tortured, surveilled, and disappeared any Iranian who challenged the throne. At its peak, the agency fielded 5,000 full officers and a far larger web of paid informants across every city. Roughly 400 SAVAK officers passed through American training programs every year at the height of the partnership. An entire generation of Iranians grew up understanding that the United States owned their king. Their resentment pooled in the mosques, where exiled clerics like Ruhollah Khomeini sermonized against the Pahlavi regime. By January 1979, the streets of Tehran belonged to the revolution, and the Shah fled for the last time. On the 1st February, Ayatollah Khomeini landed in Tehran after 14 years of exile, greeted by 3 million people. 9 months later, on 4th of November 1979, militant students stormed the American embassy in central Tehran. They feared another coup like 1953, especially after Washington admitted the dying Shah for medical treatment. They seized 66 Americans, eventually holding 52 hostages for exactly 444 days. The crisis destroyed the Carter presidency and poisoned Iranian-American relations for the next 4 decades. Every crisis that followed, the hostages, the sanctions, the proxy wars, trace back to that August afternoon. For 6 decades after the coup, the United States denied any role, while every Iranian grew up certain of it. In 2013, the CIA finally admitted its role in 1953, after 60 years of official denial. A comprehensive State Department release in 2017 exposed the full mechanics of the operation to the world. Every Iranian leader since 1979 has cited the coup as proof that the United States cannot be trusted. Every American negotiator since 1979 has sat across from the grandchildren of 1953, and few of them understood it. Which brings us back to April of 2026 and the warships now surrounding the Strait of Hormuz. After the Islamabad talks collapsed on 12th of April, President Trump ordered a full naval blockade of Iranian ports. More than 12 warships and 10,000 personnel now patrol the coast that British drills first opened 118 years ago. The CIA wanted cheap oil and a pliant king, and 73 years later, the bill is still arriving.